Great, thanks very much. Good afternoon, good evening, good morning, depending where you are. Welcome to this session. So this is all going to be about the Energy Transitions Council and its Rapid Response Facility. And I'm just going to bring up the agenda. So I'll kick off with some opening remarks, but they are literally very brief. We've got a fairly busy agenda today. And so what I'd like people to do, if they have questions, do send them in. But I think what we'll do is we'll look at all of them at the end, because we've got a number of interesting presentations to make, partly about what is the ETC, what is the RRF, and then what have been the experiences for our partner countries. So please listen to those, and if you have questions, we'll deal with them at the end. So without further ado, I'm going to open with some remarks from Damilola Ogunbiyi, who's the CEO of Sustainable Energy for All. She couldn't be here in person today, but she's going to speak to us through a short video that she recorded for this occasion.
I'm pleased to open the last session of the Climate Compatible Growth COP26 side event. Access to sustainable energy unleashes economic growth, creates new jobs, and increases climate resilience and other critical sustainable development goals. Yet far too many developing countries continue to face challenges accessing the finance they need to close the gap and to invest in clean energy solutions. This is where joined up technical assistance happening on the spot rapidly in response to what countries need is what is needed. This is what we created at the Energy Transition Council, and this is the reason why we're here today to discuss the important facility known as a Rapid Response Facility. The Energy Transition Council is one of the key initiatives of the UK COP26 presidency for promoting and supporting ambitious clean energy transitions in developing countries, and we are seeing the results. We see from the development partners an increasing cooperation, and that we created a strong package of financial and technical support to help secure renewables as the most attractive option. It's also important to help get people to understand what the energy transition means. And we're seeing a range of activities to retire coal in Indonesia, to the net zero announcement Nigeria made yesterday, and to bolster renewables in South Africa. The facility supports swift action that directly responds to the needs in dialogue between the developing countries and the Energy Transition Council. It also complements a host of different initiatives from multilateral organizations. But this is no top-down affair. At no time has demand been higher from countries, and more needs to be done. The ETC is built around country-specific demands and effective collaboration. In 12 of our initial countries, we have developed deep partnerships. These countries include Egypt, Kenya, Morocco, Nigeria, South Africa, Bangladesh, India, Indonesia, Laos, Pakistan, the Philippines, and Vietnam. Clear asks require urgent and flexible research, support, coordination, and diplomacy. To accelerate supporting research and technical cooperation, the Rapid Response Facility was created to fill these gaps. Growing the momentum and the impact of the ETC and the facility is critical. This means not only increased coverage of demand and opportunity, but also of partners, political ambition, and the scale of financing actually required. We welcome that the ETC and the facility are set to continue for at least another 5 years, and we hope you can all come and join us on this great way to make sure that we really respond to the clean energy offer. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you. So next up, we have an introduction to the ETC and the RRF, and I'm going to hand over to Matthew Savage and Hannah Chambers, who are from the UK government's COP unit.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for coming today. So many of you in the room are familiar with what the ETC, the Energy Transition Council, does, but for those of you who are new to this, just a brief introduction of where it came from and what it's resulted in. So the Energy Transition Council is an initiative that was set up by the UK COP presidency, and the aim was to bring together ministers in developing countries and developed countries that had an interest in accelerating the transition away from coal power and other fossil fuels towards clean alternatives, with energy experts from international agencies, from the development banks and international financial institutions, investors in the private sector, and other stakeholders, in order to have an effective dialogue that really pinpointed what, in particular, developing countries need in order to hasten their transition to clean power, and give them a forum in which they can go through the challenges that they're facing and the opportunities, and for those international partners that are offering the support to deconflict the support that we're offering, to ensure that it is rapid and targeted to those needs, and the short-term interventions lead into medium-term assistance, which also links to some of the big longer-term programming and investment that is out there from some of the big climate funds and from the private sector. So we chose 12 countries to start with in Asia and Africa, and assembled a group of like-minded countries, Canada, many European countries, the US, and worked in a dedicated way through these political dialogues at a senior political level, as well as at more working level in each of these countries, and worked to mobilize a tailored offer to each country as to how we could help them with their energy transition goals. The result of this has been, yesterday was the Energy Theme Day at COP26, and many of these countries felt that they had been supported to address the energy needs that they had been raising in these dialogues, that we were able to open up conversations about them being more ambitious about their public commitments to end coal power in particular. And I'm sure my colleagues will talk in more detail about this, but a couple of examples are the commitment from Vietnam to join our global coal to clean power transition statement that we published yesterday. This was as a direct result of some of the interventions that we mobilized through the Energy Transition Council, the international partners working on the ground and working through this facility we set up, the Rapid Response Facility, to address some of the technical challenges and questions that the Vietnamese government had. Another example would be Morocco, where when we first started the dialogue with them, they made very clear that the coal discussion was off the table. But because we helped them with some of the clean energy goals that they were raising, they started to open up and be more ambitious as to how they could achieve their transition. So I'll hand to Matt now.
Yes, thank you, Hannah. So I'll just say a few words about the Rapid Response Facility before we hand over for some of the detail. So the Rapid Response Facility was always conceived as a way of enhancing the existing international offer. So we work with a lot of partners, the MDBs, the donors, the technical agencies, who have their own political relationships, their own programs, their own interventions in all of these countries. But we wanted to make sure that that offer was joined up, and that where the demand for assistance wasn't being met over the short term, that we could pull together consortia of partners in and around the ETC who would be able to respond from their existing programs. And we were very fortunate that the MDBs and the donors and philanthropies as well stepped up in the context of COP26 and agreed to soft earmark or hypothecate some of their existing programming to be able to respond to the political challenges that were being identified through the dialogues. And what we'll go on to hear about today are some of the opportunities that emerged from the dialogues, and actually how the team working through the Secretariat of the Rapid Response Facility, we were able to assemble remarkable, actually, consortia over a 6 to 9 month period to actually get working on more than 20 really quite complex technical requests. And many of those partners are in the room today. So many thanks from our side for engaging and stepping up. And it's now our intention to sort of take that model further, to learn the lessons of what we've done over the last 6 to 9 months, and see how we can enhance that going forward, taking into account the existing architecture and the other initiatives that are ongoing. So we look forward to discussing that.
Thank you very much. So next up, we're going to hear how it actually works in practice. So we're going to hear about the ETC country dialogues and the RF process, its activities, the responses, and the impact it's had. And to kick us off will be Eleanor Criswell from BEIS, followed by Koen van Dam from Imperial College, and then Pauline Heinrichs from E3G.
So yeah, just to look at it in a little bit more detail, Hannah gave a really good example there of Vietnam in particular, and also wanted to draw out some of our experiences in the Philippines, for example, where we really saw this kind of methodical, thorough process happen incredibly quickly at the beginning of 2021, beginning of this year. And we set about, after the establishment of the ETC at the end of 2020, we used kind of the first quarter of this year to really start the dialogue process in our 12 countries that we are operating in. And in the Philippines, for example, this took the form of a government dialogue, bringing all of our partners, all of the existing donors into one room and really exposing what some of the key priorities were of the Philippines government early on in the process so that we could understand how we could best respond to those. We mapped out exactly what was already there so that we were making sure we weren't duplicating, identifying where some of the gaps were, and really bringing in donors and institutions who were already operating there to find the best way of mobilizing additional support where we could. And then, where that wasn't possible, bringing in the Rapid Response Facility to do that. And actually, the Philippines is probably a really good example of that as well, where we've mobilized a good chunk of support. In terms of the shape of the year, on the slide, which we do have, we had our second ministerial in April, and at that ministerial we announced the Rapid Response Facility, and it was really a moment to kind of bring things up to a ministerial level and make sure that we were setting that political ambition in place for the run-up to COP. What did we want to achieve through this process, and how could we practically do that through this dialogue? I think since then we've recognized how important it's been to be really flexible. All of the 12 countries have operated incredibly differently. The Philippines, as I say, was a very thorough, methodical process. We ended up having a number of different dialogues. We set up 3 different working groups to focus on different areas: energy efficiency, renewables, innovation, etc., to really hone in on what some of those specific areas were that the Philippines government, articulated that they would like additional support from partners on. And then when we got to our next ministerial in July, that was again, particularly looking at those COP outcomes. What do we need to do now? How do we consolidate efforts to bring forwards what we want to see at COP26 as that major moment in the year? We also started having conversations about the future of, the ETC process and listening to the countries that were engaging with us and, all of our partners, many of whom are in this room, about how we could continue this process in the most useful way. And I think we've only just started having that dialogue with a lot of the ETC countries, and we very much plan to continue that in the remainder of this year, but also at the beginning of next year to review what we've done and set the priorities for the future of the ETC as well. So just to touch on that briefly then, yesterday we published our ETC 2022 Strategic Priorities document, available on gov.uk and at the SC4All website. And that really sets out the core areas that we're going to continue to work. So from energy planning to energy efficiency to just transition principles in line with the declaration that we launched yesterday on Energy Day as well. And we also spoke a little bit about how it's going to operate in terms of new countries coming into the process. We very much would like to continue engagement with all of the existing countries. but also, potentially explore whether we could bring others into the process. We'd love to broaden out our geographic scope, but we're also very conscious of the intensity of this kind of high trust private dialogue that we've nurtured in these countries, and that level of engagement, I think, has been really crucial to getting some of the outcomes that we've seen with, really great support from the others in the ETC Secretariat, E3G, SE for All as well as many of our other partners on the ground. I think that's everything I want to say. This slide here just shows what the future ETC structure will look like, very similar to this year. We will still have our council members as some of the core institutions operating in the international community on climate, ETC Secretariat underpinning that, moving into the clean power dialogues with the ETC countries, and then deploying that support that, as Hannah says, then links to the major energy programs that are available. We're also very conscious of, lots of the other existing initiatives, the Green Grids Initiative, OSAWOG Initiative, which was launched at the World Leaders Summit earlier this week, and also around building private sector confidence as well in the process. That's everything I'd like to say.
Thank you. Yeah, very good to be here in Glasgow. And before I got on the train from London up here, my daughter asked, "Why are you going? What are you doing?" And I tried to explain briefly what I'm going to tell you here as well. But her response was, COPs are no good because we had 26 of them and there's still climate change. So I promised to find out what is happening here and report back to her. But I think I know the answer, and that lies in the word collaboration, which is also what was emphasized by Sharma when he launched the Rapid Response Facility at the Second Ministerial back in April. So I'll use a bit of time to explain briefly what the Rapid Response Facility is and how it's set up, and we'll go to the next slide. Sharma, the co-president, said that the Rapid Response Facility was set up to play a key role in supporting countries to make real, clear progress in their transition. I think that's something we already saw in the Cold Clean statement published yesterday. In the first bullet, countries agreed to make that transition and accelerate the uptake of cleaner renewable energy, but as part of that same point, they promised to help other countries to do that as well. And I think that is key here. And Sharma called the Rapid Response Facility, the ETC's spirit of collaboration in action. So how do we do that? We've set up the RF as a hub and spoke model. The hub is pretty much the team you see here in front of us, and the spokes are the partner organizations, development banks, development agencies, networks, philanthropy, private sector partners that have supported the RF. And again, it's fantastic to see many of them here in the room, and I look forward to talking to you all after the session. What we did in practice is part of the country dialogues that have been taking place with the ETC-focused countries is to extract requests for challenges that could not be met in country by the existing initiatives, by the existing platforms, by the existing activities in the country, and to find out what are the gaps that really need support from the international community to move this work forward. And it's those requests that we have collected, and as part of the dialogues were then submitted by the British Embassy team, but in direct collaboration with the institutions, Ministry of Energy, utility companies, and national research labs, but always with that government support and the need expressed by the government. We need support to move forward with our transition. And then as a hub, we worked iteratively with the requesting institution to really fine-tune that request before sharing that with all the partners who had put their resources together. And we've been very grateful that was up to a sum of around £10 million of resources that have been allocated to respond to these requests. So what we did is to share these requests with all in our network, all the spokes, collected responses from them, and then we had manual monthly meetings with representatives of each of these spokes. And then collectively, in a transparent way, we agreed on the way forward and which consortium would be able to take up this request, would be able to respond quickly in the timeframes that were set. Sometimes that was with the COP as a deadline, often a little bit later, but always fast and much faster than these processes typically work. So spirit of collaboration in action there, because we've seen spokes coming together, development partners coming together to build new consortiums to respond, and that has been incredibly fruitful and effective, not only to provide direct response to these requests, but also to share what else is already happening in these countries and to really make that transparent and to show what we can do to provide. And I think a key part of that support has also been really to give these countries the confidence that support from the international community is there, that if they have technical questions, if they have policy questions, if they want to know more about the transition and they need support, best practices internationally, or capacity building in countries so that they are able themselves to take that path forward. That has really worked, and today we're going to hear from 3 countries that have been part of this process, and we're grateful that they are here to share their experiences. Pauline, I can give the floor to you to give the high-level overview of
I want to add that my first day at E3G was actually the first RF Hub meeting. So I feel very much that this is a bit of work child in many ways. And it's very exciting to see everyone in 3D rather than 2. And I'm very happy also to be here. I will be quickly discussing a little bit on what we have done so far, but also what we've identified to be some of the bottlenecks, as well as challenges, and then how we want to take this work forward. And as I said, the first day of my job was actually the first hub meeting, and that is equivalent to this being very much an ongoing and evolving learning process. And we are learning a lot, but we have also learned a lot, I would say. It's come a long way from the first request that has come in to the ones we're processing now. And that was also because we were able to refine some of our models in the way going forward. So those are the 24 requests that we're currently processing and or responding to. Some of them were very well shaped up and at the beginning of when they had happened, so we didn't have to do a lot, but some others were initially quite suggestive, and then we were speaking to countries. So in terms of how we want to take this forward, I think the element of need identification is really, really important. So we were talking a lot or discussing a lot internally, how do you suggest a request, for example, to countries, and how do some countries have the capacity, in fact, to process what is needed in their ministries, for example. I think, Matt, you were mentioning earlier that we counted over 600 initiatives in the ETC partner countries already happening. There is a lot of asks, especially ahead of COP, that are being asked of the different ministries that we were engaging with. I remember in the Philippines at some point, I had to look for the titles in the emails because I didn't quite know what request I was actually processing. So that need identification is something that firstly relies on, in the future, being a bit more programmatic, I think, and long-term, and understanding how things are moving forward, especially as, even though we have the rapid in the name, things were sometimes slower than we had anticipated. And I think understanding where those bottlenecks are, especially in response times from different ministries, is going to be a really important aspect of it. Then that element of improved coordination is not just among the spokes, but also within the ministries and building up capacity to then have that improved coordination, but also to understand that the RF doesn't want to duplicate anything that's already there. We had a lot of requests where we only later realized, oh, wait a minute, there are actually studies on this already. Do we need to do this again, or do we need to synthesize the findings? And can we actually take the learnings from country A to apply in country B, because a lot of those studies might be applicable and a lot of the challenges are very similar. So that avoiding duplication and really filling the gaps and adding to programmatic work rather than duplicating that work. Then the flexibility of that is really important. I am very proud for the RF to be demand-led in that way and not unpolitical. Of course, it's tied to a COP process, but it's been incredibly engaging to see how many stakeholders on the ground we were talking to and how many different people. We got to speak to each other. I was just earlier on a panel in the Moroccan Pavilion working with SIE and supported by CCG and BASE, and really opening the doors to a lot of discussions that I didn't think would happen otherwise, and bringing those different strands of work together in a comprehensive platform-like way, especially on those ETC countries, has been really, really helpful. And then that access to finance, of course, people will be mobilized if there's an offer there, and understanding what the blockers are in technical assistance pieces and how they can unlock that process will be a key important element of that. Because we, of course, can offer technical assistance through the RF, but ultimately, where does that feasibility study go? What process can it unlock? What is it there for if it's not then being taken up into a longer programmatic effort, which is going to be an essential part. We have a lot of stakeholders asking for how can we engage with private finance institutions, for example? How can we build trust in investors building this work out, so for us to take it on, or to build small and medium-sized enterprises that then also help shaping up the economy of the countries that we're working with. And lastly, program enhancement. So where are there already existing programs that just need added work to? We had a very specific case in Kenya where we're developing the scope of work, and then the Kenyan side asked us, oh, actually, we would like for this program also to add this study and this element so we can make it into a comprehensive strategy. I think all of this means that we still are learning, and that's also part of the exciting element of it. And I'm also very excited to be then taking the RF work forward in a more programmatic, maybe less COP26 intense way. But so far, I think the lessons have been that there's a lot of great work to build on, and now to fine-tune those and to get some of the dirt out of the gear, if that is an expression, to move that forward. And I'm very excited to be part of that.
Could I ask you, Pauline, if we can go back to the slide with the list of requests on? I don't know if it's possible to... Yes.
Yeah.
Just to talk through some of the partners and the consortia that were put together there, just to recognise some of the people in the room maybe as well.
I would love to name drop all of the different names. I think there are loads of exciting elements happening. I think the first standout thing here is that for most of these requests, you don't see actually a single delivery partner responding to it, but multiple delivery partners responding to it. And even where there, for example, is CCG mentioned as one, or SEA-ETP, in the process of writing those terms of references, there's a lot of stakeholder involvement. So SEA-ETP's work, which wasn't always easy in the coal abatement scenario mapping, involved a lot of local stakeholder dialogues, and a lot of dialogues also, sometimes quite tricky conversations. Likewise, I think one of the exciting things, for example, about the clean cooking request is how you do have that research element with CCG, the agency element with GIZ, and then also AFD and UK PAC coming together to respond to different elements of that clean cooking strategy. And that then becomes also programmatic, because clean cooking is such a priority area for the Kenyan government as identified by the ETC dialogue, but also in a lot of stakeholder conversations. I'm really excited also about a lot of what else has already mentioned in the Philippines. It was such a long process, but very meticulously planned through the response plan of the Philippines. Is striking because it lists so many programs that are already underway. And I remember sitting in front of the Philippines response plan and just looking at the actual gaps and saying, okay, here's the gap, let's write that into a response. And it was really great then to see the reactions of the DOE that we've been mostly working with to say, oh, okay, that has been a gap for a very long time. Now here's the request, we are responding to it. Altogether, we've also advanced some conversations, for example, around PP renegotiation. And whilst you might see that most of them are still in orange, whilst that is a very, very long process, it felt to me like we're slowly opening the door. And we do understand that there are loads of sensitivities around it. That's maybe what I meant also earlier by the apolitical nature. Sometimes it's not entirely apolitical, but it's easier, I think, as the Rapid Response Facility to say we have international experts and money to support you with that request. Would you like it? And I think that is actually quite a powerful thing to do, rather than to say you need to now renegotiate all of your PPAs. Whilst I would have loved to say that, of course it doesn't work like that in practice. Altogether, I'm very happy also to see that we responded to almost every single ETC country. The ones that we haven't yet responded, we have requests lined up that are currently being agreed by the different ministries or institutions that we're working with. Also in Morocco, for example, we're working with 5 different key stakeholders that we are responding in different requests to. So I was mentioning SIE earlier, but AMI also, for example, in ANRE. And knowing that these institutions can be brought together under the ETC and RF framework has been really, really great.
Great. Thank you very much. So in this part of the... Yeah, let's give them a big round of applause. Can you pass me the clicker? So we've heard how it works, and we've heard it from the perspective of the team that was involved in getting it up and running. So our next 3 speakers are going to be talking about it from the perspective of the countries that we've been collaborating with. This bit is going to be interesting for me as a chair, because we're going to go live to people that are not present in the room. So I hope this works well, because our first speaker is from Lao PDR. He's going to talk about the ETC country experience. It's John Cotton from the UK Embassy. So over to you, John.
Hello. Can you hear me okay there? Am I coming through? Okay. On behalf of the British Embassy Vientiane in Laos, I'm honoured and delighted to be invited to this event. You're all still in 2D for me. It's nice to see you there, but my invitation still stands, and I hope to see you this side of the world in the not too distant future. Today, I'd like to introduce Laos through the lens of its energy sector and discuss how and why we set up the Energy Transition Council, how we progress to the RRF, and what we plan for the future. So Laos, for context, is a landlocked country sharing its borders with the dynamic and emerging markets of Vietnam, Cambodia, Thailand, Myanmar, and China. They have increasing power demands for which they are in part looking to Laos. This is driving the demand of energy exports. The top right shows the annual rainfall, and if this was superimposed on a topographical map, it would illustrate the hydropower potential here, which does account for over 80% of domestic energy produced. The bottom left shows a solar irradiance map, illustrating high potential throughout the country, but particularly in the west and the flatlands. Along the east lay wind pockets well suited for wind energy. In short, Laos is blessed with the natural resources to exploit green and variable renewable energy, which can work together in hybrid. This next slide, we can really see the economic importance of the energy sector here in Laos. In 2019, Laos power exports, at that time mainly to Thailand, generated 1.3 billion USD in export revenue. It's planned that Laos will increase its power exports in the coming years by nearly 400%, with multiple cross-border agreements already in place. The importance of the energy as an export commodity is therefore very apparent from this. It's necessary to highlight that in these future plans, renewables constitute 5%, which is a huge increase from where we are. Hydro is 65%, but there's an emergence of coal, which is earmarked to play an important role in this expansion. The current pipeline is around 6 gigawatts, making it the 6th largest coal pipeline in the world. For this coal pipeline, we've been given economic arguments related to power trade in addition to investments made so far. Technical arguments presented to us center around baseload and firm power. There are underlying complexities and stakeholders that will lose from an energy transition, and arguments that are seemingly coherent with broader economic and social development goals. For these reasons, we determined and saw the need for the Energy Transition Council here in Laos and to support Laos with a just transition. And so began the journey of the Energy Transition Council. From the very beginning, it's important to note that we strategized to take a demand-side mindset, co-creating the Ministry of Energy and Mines. There's a unique landscape here with many interplays between public and private sector, and therefore it was imperative that we took steers from the Ministry of Energy and Mines. Additionally, we intended to build long-term ownership and capacity, enhancing collaboration and avoiding duplication and fragmentation of efforts. This could only be achieved with strong ministry directives and insights. As a result, the first steps taken were to ensure that the Ministry of Energy and Mines are on board, engage with them, and during this process, scope what activities are already taking place and ascertain what gaps exist. This we did through the Energy Transition Council with the team that are sitting in the room today. Through these bilateral discussions with the MEM, we planned together how the ETC might develop, performing which roles and engaging with which partners. It was determined that we'd keep the ETC relatively small. This we felt was suited to the particular environment here. When engaging with potential delivery partners, we invited those that we felt matched the requirements as set out by the MEM and consciously avoided making the room too full, which we thought might prohibit productive dialogue. We leveraged on the strong UK-Lao relations and aimed, at the beginning at least, to coordinate with neutral parties or parties new to Lao. At the same time, we kept the door open for observers. We disseminated non-sensitive information transparently, but this door slightly ajar approach allowed for meaningful discussion and to touch on sensitive areas. For the country dialogues, it was critical to us that the MEM were the drivers of the discussion and debate. The agenda, the speakers, were compiled bilaterally between the ETC and the MEM. This did in fact result in open dialogue, presentations and information sharing in areas that the MEM were genuinely interested in and engaged throughout. Through the rapid response, we were able to make 3 firm offers to the MEM, which were a direct response to their requests. As a result, MEM have accepted the offers, and we are keen to proceed formal kick-off of each of these. I think we're all waiting for the post-COP26 world where now we can get back to some level of normality and push on with these, and that's where we're at now. In the engagement process with the Ministry of Energy and Mines, there were 4 main areas where interventions would be welcomed were highlighted. The first was human resources. Lao has a competent workforce, particularly inside the government sector, but such rapid growth into new technologies invariably leaves gaps. The second was accessing finance. For various reasons, project bankability is hard to reach here, meaning conventional access to finance is not always an option, and resulting in projects seeking PPAs direct with neighbouring countries' off-takers, thus bypassing the government of Laos. The third relates to the grid. In short, it's not set up in such a way that it can easily incorporate renewables. Herein lies an opportunity for green grid planning, power system upgrades, and opportunity to future-proof the grid before it's developed. And the fourth relates to power trade with its neighbours, which cross-cuts the 3 aforementioned areas. So, through the ETC and utilising RF, 3 offers have been made to Lao, covering the most pertinent needs and matching the demand-side driven requests. The first is a techno-economic pre-feasibility study to look at how to integrate renewables and explore hybrid systems between current and future power generating assets. Throughout the ETC and through multiple other dialogues that I've personally sat through, the government of Laos are told it's cheap and easy to integrate renewables. There's a general rhetoric that they need to get more renewables on the grid, but their response is valid. It's not as simple as just integrating renewables. They say that the variable element is very hard to manage. Grid upgrades and technical requirements are expensive. Storage is an emerging technology with no precursor in Laos, and that coal is a much easier and reliable option, particularly when we look at cross-border trade where a single 2,000 megawatt power plant can export instantaneously to another country as opposed to making a hybrid of renewables. So this is the reason we established the ETC, and thankfully, CCG, along with IRENA, CCG and GreenMap, have made a collaborative offer and stepped up to answer this challenge. The deliverable will be a pilot and a proof of concept of renewables integration. It will involve the co-creation of an energy system model, not here the co-creation element. It requires ownership from the government of Laos to be of real use and have sustainability moving forward. Very much CCG's philosophy, which has been great working with them on this. And there'll be a designing of a roadmap to promote and implement renewable energy financing. This is a 2-year program and will ideally provide the foundation and frameworks to build on for the energy sector as a whole. 2 other offers came through the ETC, which will run simultaneously. The first is under the Low Carbon Energy Programme and led by Ernst & Young. The focus to begin with will be on capacity building with regards to sustainable finance and how to green the financial sector and the availability of sustainable finance products. Sometimes the term green bonds, especially here, seems to have the awe of a golden bullet, but policy frameworks and institutions need to be aligned accordingly, and Ernst & Young will be supporting Lao PDI in this journey. The third offer will align National Grid with its Lao counterpart EDL. This will primarily be a technical assistance program offering support, strengthening and reviewing energy modelling, planning for network and market development Lao, and delivered via workshops, training and peer-to-peer support. So I'll conclude by saying the main takeaways here is that a move from coal is complex, and a pathway needs to be set which is perhaps not imminently obvious or easy to achieve. But by engaging with the Ministry of Energy and Mines, giving them ownership of the approach, we have the opportunity to bring in support and programs most aligned to the needs of the Lao power system. Going forward, we hope this lays a foundation to build on, to have a working and demonstrated pilot, and to therefore build a prosperous and low carbon energy sector. What I'd also like to say is there's space here for more stakeholders, and any groups interested in joining Lao with their energy transition shouldn't hesitate to come forward. We're really at the very beginning of this discussion. I'd also like to take this opportunity to say thank you to the Government of Lao, to E3G, CCG, the Energy Transition Council, and my colleagues at the FCDO, because this has been a great journey, and I look forward to continuing it. Thank you very much.
Great, thank you very much, John. So I'm not quite sure how the next bit of the program is going to go. We were hoping to hear from Isaac Kiva from Kenya, but I'm not sure if he's managed to access the platform. It sounds as though that's not been possible. And so I'm hopeful that instead we'll hear from the experience in Morocco. We actually have with us in Glasgow Ahmed Baroudi from the SIE, which is the Energy Engineering Institute. He's not able to come because he's having to self-isolate, but I believe he's able to join us electronically and to tell us about the experience from Morocco. Welcome.
Good. Yes, good evening. Very happy to be with you, even if I have to be isolated. Sorry for this. For this. Energy. Alors, attendez. I will start. Okay. Good. It works. SIE, a brief history. We previously, 10 years ago, we have been created in Morocco as an energy investment company to invest in renewable energy mainly and big programs. We learned a lot. We launched all the initial energy transition phase, and after a decade, the global results obliged us to observe a lack of energy efficiency results. That's why we transformed the energy investment company to the energy engineering company, which is a super ESCO, public company. Well, this super ESCO structure now offers a large range of services because we are all mainly working on energy-based services contract concept, and we are mainly promoting and pushing the market of energy efficiency in Morocco. It's a new market. It will create new jobs, new kind of jobs in Morocco, and we have to success, and we are acting mainly as a facilitator. We don't do the job, but we make it possible. Well, the targeted sectors are here. It's public buildings, lighting, also mobility and transport and manufacturing. Well, that's the main sectors. But the most important for me is the development and the support of the energy efficiency ecosystem. And from the first step to success on it is to support private sector, private SMEs, private ESCOs, to make them to do the job, not us. For our concern, we are only here to facilitate it, to make things happen. Well, this slide summarizes our missions. Of course, we have to support the state study to set the example, because if we want to talk about energy efficiency, to push people to implement energy efficiency, the state has to show the good example. So we do that. We have to make a sustainable economic impact, to mobilize the best suited financial resources. It's a legacy of our previous experience that we have on our portfolio, and of course, develop the Moroccan ecosystem. We implement some different, project financing methods. We finance directly. The financing can be done directly by ESCOs. Classic method, financing method. Some customers, some clients want to fund by themselves their projects because they want to take profit immediately from all the savings, energy savings, and the rest. So that's why this is a model too. And we use also third-party financing with partners, banks, or things like that. And basically, in fact, in case by case, we mix this very often. We mix these possibilities to cover the needs of the projects. Well, that's to summarize, the skills and the field of expertise of SIE. I will pass through that to go directly to practical cases for public building sector. We have, for example, launched a national program for mosques. You have to know that we have something like 55,000 mosques in the country. And the idea is to modernize the mosques through energy efficiency, to upgrade with simple things, very simple to implement. But the difficulty here was to develop the methodology. We start with one mosque, then 3, then a set of 100 mosques to finalize and consolidate the concept model. And now the rhythm that we have reached today is 3,000 mosques a year. All these update actions are made by SMEs, by auto entrepreneurs, through contracts that we are managing today, and only private sector is working here. That's one example. Of course, the mosques are disseminated on the whole territory and the whole regions, and we have started to develop one application test for 100 mosques, just to initiate the supervision concept. It's a good thing to upgrade the energy efficiency in mosque, but we have to maintain it to be sure that it will be a sustainable solution. That's why we started this first application. And now this application is already operational, and we have this kind of screens monitoring these 100 mosques, giving us the feedback of what is working, what is not working, what are the consumptions, etc. Another practical case, it's Marrakesh, street lighting of Marrakesh. Marrakesh is, a school case study, typically. What is, for me, fantastic, it's private ESCO, GV between the municipality and the private ESCO. And that means that we have a combination between institutional funding and private funding here, but mainly the private funding. And we have reached very important performances here. It concerns typically, the availability of the light, which today is equal to 95% in comparison to 65% at the beginning, and all the implemented solutions are well aligned with all the international standards. In fact, we have chosen to respect the European standards for Marrakesh, and really, it's a great success. Here it's an important message. I want to focus on it. That's why I mentioned previously the test application. I would like to thanks a lot ETC and the Rapid Response Facility for its support, because it will help us to set up a national solution, a supervision solution, to which will allow us. It's a measurement and verification system, which will allow us to monitor the results of each project in the country. It's a global monitoring system, and also thanks to Basel as chief to BASE, we are very happy to have been made in contact by ETC with BASE. It's a networking also action. Thanks to Pauline, really, because we had this morning a very, very interesting meeting. We are very, very happy to work with BASE. I think that we learn a lot. I agree with Pauline. We are in a learning phase today, and all that we are doing it, of course, to answer to our country need on one side, but at the same time we are already preparing us to share what we are learning, to share what we are doing with other countries. We announced with the cooperation with African Development Bank, for example, the creation of the Super ESCO African Club, which will be a platform, a cooperation platform between countries, with the objective to share our experience, to allow other countries to save time, to accelerate their developments, etc. It will be only for that, nothing more. And it's launched officially today, and I'm very, very happy to share this information with you. Well, that's all what I had to say, and thank you very much for your attention.
Excellent. Thank you very much. So that brings our formal presentations to a close. So we've got a few minutes for the panel to have a look at some of the questions that have come through. I've been having a look at them, and actually they're quite interesting because they actually give a good indication that whoever's sending these in has a good understanding of what we're trying to achieve within the ETC and the RF. And so our question that's got the most votes at the moment is a very good question. What are the benefits for partner governments of signing up to the ETC? Is there finance for resilience and adaptation? In my view, I think it's much more than that. It's about having a one-stop shop to help with the energy transition. It's to provide that broad base of expertise. But I'm sure my colleagues here will also like to say something. I don't know who would like to go first.
Yeah, shall I say
Else?
that? I mean, ultimately, the process is demand-led, and at every single point, we want to make sure that we're responding to the priorities that our ETC governments want us, to tackle. And we've really been framing it in the short, medium, and long term. The short term is really about the rapid response facility, filling those urgent short-term needs. And then into the medium term, as Hannah said, mobilizing some of that additional support from existing programs, from our donor countries, from institutions in the ETC, and then making sure that there is that longer-term picture as well to some of the major energy programs, such as the Climate Investment Funds, which has been one of the key programs that we've been trying to connect ETC countries with over the past couple of months.
One of the activities of the ETC that you don't see from the recipient or partner country side are the discussions amongst the donor group, and how those discussions lead to an alignment of support and funding for major development assistance programs, such as the CIFS or ESMAP or the IEA Clean Energy Transition Program or the Southeast Asia Energy Transition Program. So the donor group are trying to create these centers of gravity globally, sectorally, regionally, which can then respond to the priorities of the countries themselves. At the national level, I think what we're offering is a joined-up dialogue. And there we're enhancing the existing donor coordination groups, the existing dialogues that exist amongst some development partners, but really trying to bring in capacity and resource into those, and to link back into the global financial discussions, so that there are clear sort of routes to market for the ideas and the program ideas that emerge.
One thing.
Hannah.
Just a very small point, which is to also emphasize that the Energy Transition Council is about peer learning as well. We bring these countries together as peers, and it's not just a donor country, recipient country relationship at all. There are definitely things, for example, that are happening in India, which are very groundbreaking with their very ambitious renewable energy target, now increased to 500 gigawatts of non-fossil energy by 2030, which means that they're really taking their grid capacity to the limit, and they're trying new things which other countries can be learning from. John Cotton spoke really well from Laos, which is an example of a country that really wants to become like the battery of Asia and building interconnections with other countries. So these are really interesting and exciting things that are happening in emerging economies, which also reflect on what we're trying to do in the UK and with European countries and other to trade renewable electricity. Morocco wants to become a regional hub. So there is a large element of bringing these countries together to also understand what's happening in other countries that they could learn from.
Matt.
I know we're sort of moving towards the end of time, but I see a couple of the questions here are about short-term and long-term linkages. I think it is true, this was conceived in the cauldron of COP26, and we did have at least 1.5 eyes on short-term political dynamics and political winds. So our responsiveness was very responsive to national government needs, because we wanted to show that the international community was serious about engaging. I think now that we've proved the model and we've got a 5-year mandate going forward, we can take a little bit more of a structured approach and start essentially planning not to sort of pick off all the small technical assistance gaps, although we will still do some of that, but to think about where do we want to be in 2025. So what is that development stage that we need to have reached in our target countries, and therefore have a sort of longer term discussion around that planning process and the bridge from where we are now to the new financing that will emerge with the next set of CIF programs, or with the Global Energy Alliance, or the CIFs, or the GCF, or wherever else this finance is going to come from through the MDBs, that we can take that into a more structured discussion going forwards, and that the partner countries can have the certainty and the faith that the international community is sort of in it for the medium to long term as a discussion partner in a coordinated way.
I think sometimes the idea of, okay, what is this study now practically? We were discussing yesterday, I'm a very action point kind of person. And likewise, I think for the RF, that's one of the elements that I'm quite keen to take forward. So we have this study now, we have demonstrated some feasibility for X project and or for X renewable energy built out. But what does that now mean in terms of a roadmap? Or we were talking to SE4All the other day in the case of Nigeria, we now have a roadmap. How do we incrementally take that forward? And I think for transition, we really need to also remember it's a process. And a lot of the things that we've been experiencing in the RF as we were developing responses to the requests is, yes, they're a tiny nugget in this process, but they might unblock some bigger wheels that then unblock some bigger wheels that then move things forward in time. And at the same time, if you have the ability to be demand-led, then you also have the ability to add things to the scope of work as you move through time. But sometimes you just don't know what will be added through time and how conversations shape up.
We've seen that in practice, that a request was responded to and we'd go back to the government and then we identify a new request as a result of that, which was then processed again through the RF. And maybe also to add what Matt said for the long term, I think the proactive nature of the RF could become more visible then as well. We could identify an offer that we could bring to countries and share experiences and identify issues that are not unique to one country, but they will need unique solutions perhaps, but some of the experience and best practices could be translated. So we could have an offer in place that we could go to the countries and provide long-term support also, leading up to access to finance, having well-supported proposals in place for that. And we hope to see that with the CIFs in the coming months now.
Well, thanks very much, everyone. I've been given the sign to close the session. So this is the 12th and final session of the Climate Compatible Growth side event. It's been a long week for many of you, and it's been a busy time for all of us in the CCG program. So I'll close the session here, and I'm going to hand over to Mark, who's going to just wrap up and invite you to have a bit of fun, I think. So over to you.